A sarcastic teacher handed her a violin in front of the whole class, expecting her to choke. What she did instead left the room in complete silence, and him without a word. There was something about walking into a new school at 14 that made your stomach feel too small for your body. Amara Jennings felt it the second she stepped off the school bus in Bakersfield, California, clutching the strap of her backpack like it was the only familiar thing in this new place. Southridge Middle School wasn't fancy, but it had that sun-baked feel you only get in California. Dust clinging to the corners of the brick walls, the faint smell of pavement in the air. The front office buzzed with quiet chatter and the occasional beep from the scanner. No one looked up when she walked in. Just another new kid. She waited patiently while the secretary printed her schedule. No small talk, no smile. Just paper sliding across the counter and a dry, "You'll find your locker down the C hall." Her mom had told her, "Keep your head down, baby. You're here to learn, not to impress anybody." That was Amara's plan. No drama, no noise, just grades, her music, and making it through the school year without trouble. But there was something about her silence that some people seemed to notice more than if she'd spoken. By lunch, kids already had nicknames for her. Violin girl, mute chick, new girl with the pretty eyes. She heard them all in whispers when she passed. She didn't care. What mattered was orchestra. Room 117, her last period of the day. Amara wasn't just good with a violin. She was extraordinary. Not that anyone here knew. She kept that part locked down, tucked away with her memories of her grandmother. That violin bow she carried? It wasn't just wood and horsehair. It was the last gift she'd ever received from the woman who raised her while her mom worked 2 jobs. Every time she held it, she felt steadier. Inside room 117, kids were already chatting, tuning instruments. The noise scratched at her nerves. The teacher, Mr. Darnell, stood at the front with his back to the class, writing something on the whiteboard. He wore a light grey blazer that didn't quite fit right, and a forced kind of confidence that clung to his voice when he finally turned around. "We've got a new addition," he announced, like he was introducing a new chair instead of a human being. "This is Amara Jennings. She'll be joining us for the semester." She gave a quiet nod and found a seat in the back, slipping her case onto the floor. A few curious eyes followed her, but most went back to whatever teenage drama had their attention. Mr. Darnell didn't ask her any questions, didn't ask what she played, just scanned the room like he was already annoyed about something. Over the next 2 weeks, Amara settled into a rhythm. She kept her playing to herself, only joining in softly during group rehearsals. She didn't want to draw attention, not yet, but people noticed anyway. She kept her sheet music neatly folded, marked in pencil. Her posture was perfect. Her bow hand never shook. Some of the other students caught on that she knew more than she was letting on. A few whispered during class. One girl named Brianna leaned over during tuning and said, "You play better than Darnell's pets, and you don't even try." Amara just smiled and adjusted her rosin. But something about her quiet confidence seemed to rub Mr. Darnell the wrong way. Maybe it was how she never asked questions. Maybe it was the way she didn't try to win him over like some of the other kids did. Whatever it was building. You could feel it, like he was waiting for the right moment. But that moment was coming faster than anyone expected. By the 3rd week, Amara had memorized every hallway at Southridge Middle. She knew which lockers stuck, which teachers allowed food, and which students were just loud to cover up how unsure they felt. She moved quietly, headphones around her neck, sketchpad tucked under her arm, and always that violin case, worn, black, with the faded initials JJ carved near the handle. Mr. Glenn Darnell was different from most of the staff. He didn't shout, he didn't even speak loudly, but when he spoke, it carried, like the sound was just heavy enough to demand attention. He had a sharp edge in his tone, the kind that made students straighten up in their chairs, not because they respected him, but because they didn't want to deal with whatever came next. He'd been teaching orchestra at Southridge for over 12 years. Some said he used to be a serious musician, played in a chamber group, maybe even toured. But those stories were never told with admiration. More like rumors that followed someone who had peaked a long time ago and never quite recovered. In class, Darnell had favorites. Everyone could see it. The same 4 or 5 students always got first chair, solos, shout-outs. They were mostly from families who donated to the school or had parents who came to every performance. Then there were the rest, the background players, the filler. Amara knew exactly where she stood. Invisible, and that's how she preferred it. Until one Monday afternoon. The class was practicing a Mozart string ensemble, and Darnell was in a mood. One of the cello students had forgotten their sheet music, and he made a scene. Tossed a copy on their stand with a sarcastic, "Try not to waste everyone's time." Amara watched it unfold from her corner. He scanned the room, eyes jumping from face to face. Then, without warning, he stopped. "Jennings." Amara looked up. Her fingers still rested on the edge of her bow, mid-adjustment. "You've been quiet," he said. "Too quiet." Some kids snickered. Others went still. "You've been here nearly a month. I think it's time we hear what you've got." She felt her chest tighten. Not from fear, from something else. She hadn't prepared to play solo. Not today. Not in front of this room. And definitely not under this man's spotlight. Still, she stood, carefully, picked up her violin. "Great," he said, stepping aside with a mock flourish. "Let's hear what kind of magic you can do." The words hung in the air like poison. He didn't mean them kindly. There was a sharpness to the way he said magic, like he was daring her to embarrass herself. Amara didn't flinch. She brought the violin to her chin, closed her eyes for half a second, and inhaled slowly. But before she could begin, Darnell added, "Don't worry, we won't judge too harshly." A few laughs. Quiet ones. The kind that hurt more than loud ones. Amara opened her eyes. She didn't look at him. She didn't look at anyone. She played. Just one note. Then another. A slow, haunting line from a piece most of the class wouldn't recognize. Not showy, not loud, just precise, fluid, alive. Her bow danced. The room changed. But Darnell, he didn't blink. His arms folded, his jaw set tighter. You could almost hear the thoughts running behind his eyes. Where did she learn that? Who does she think she is? Amara didn't stop. Her fingers glided across the strings, lifting the room higher with every measure. No one made a sound, not even the favorites. When she finally stopped, the silence felt like pressure on the walls. She lowered her instrument, stepped back, and gently placed it on her lap. Darnell said nothing. Someone in the back whispered, "Damn!" Amara sat down like nothing had happened. But something had. Everyone felt it. But Darnell wasn't about to let that be the end of it. The next day, the classroom felt different. Not loud or chaotic, just loaded. Like everyone had read a chapter in a book they weren't supposed to, and now they were waiting to see how it ended. Amara came in like always. Headphones around her neck, violin case in hand. She took her seat in the back without making eye contact. But she could feel it. Students stealing glance, whispering behind folders. Even the ones who never noticed her before were looking twice. Darnell was already at the front, scribbling notes on the whiteboard. He didn't acknowledge her, not even a glance. Amara liked it that way. She wasn't looking for praise. She didn't need validation. She just didn't want to be dragged into anything. But Mr. Darnell was never one to let silence sit too long. Halfway through class, he turned around and clapped his hands once. "All right, let's break routine a little." The room stilled. "Today we're going to do something different. A little solo rotation. Just a few bars each. Cold play. No sheet music." A few kids groaned. One muttered, "Man, for real." He ignored them. "We'll start from the back." His eyes found Amara. "Jennings, why don't you kick us off?" It wasn't a question. She hesitated for a beat. Not because she was scared. but because she knew what this was. It wasn't about hearing music. It was about control, about putting her on the spot again in front of everyone. She opened her case slowly. Her hands moved with care, the kind of muscle memory that came from thousands of hours practicing in a cramped apartment living room with the fan always on. She stood, but before she could lift her violin, Darnell chuckled. Just loud enough. Let's hope we didn't just catch lightning in a bottle yesterday. The class laughed, nervously this time. Some looked away. Others stared at Amara, waiting to see how she'd take it. She didn't flinch. She didn't say a word. She played. This time it was more than just a response. It was a declaration. The first few notes cut through the air, like they didn't need permission to exist. She chose a passage from Saint-Saëns. Nothing easy, nothing polite. It was bold, fast, complicated. The class went still. Darnell stepped back. She played for 20 seconds, maybe 30. And when she stopped, it was like the walls had been holding their breath. Silence again. Darnell smiled. Tight. Strained. Impressive, he said. For someone who doesn't exactly look like the conservatory type. That was it. The air cracked. No one laughed this time. Even the students who usually found him funny looked stunned. One boy in the front looked from Darnell to Amara like he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. Amara froze. She stared at him, eyes sharp but calm. She didn't cry. She didn't storm out. She just stared. Darnell moved on like nothing happened. All right, let's keep it going. Jonah, your turn. Jonah didn't move. His hands were shaking slightly. Brianna whispered from 2 seats over. That was messed up. Amara sat back down slowly, setting her violin on her lap, fingers still curled tight around the bow. Her heartbeat wasn't fast. It was loud, steady, like it was keeping count. That afternoon, she didn't go to her next class. She went straight to the counselor's office. Not to report him. She didn't say a word about what happened. She just asked if there were any music clubs outside of school she could join. The counselor, a woman named Ms. Deanna Bright, tilted her head. You're the girl who played yesterday, right? Amara hesitated, then nodded. You shook up the whole music wing. I had 2 teachers asking who you were. Amara looked down. I just want a space where I can play without it turning into something else. Ms. Bright gave her a long look, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a flyer. There's a youth program downtown. Saturday mornings. They don't care where you come from, just how you play. Amara took the flyer and left without saying much. But word travels fast in a small school, and this time it was traveling straight through the front doors. By Thursday, the whispers had grown legs. They walked through the cafeteria, down the hallways, and into classrooms that had nothing to do with music. Teachers didn't mention it, but you could tell they'd heard. The way they looked at Amara was different now, less indifferent, more curious, like they were trying to match what they'd heard to the girl they passed without a glance last week. Mr. Darnell, though, acted like nothing had changed. He kept up his routine, same dry jokes, same sharp comments, same stiff posture like he was holding himself up with pride instead of backbone. But students weren't laughing anymore. They watched him now, and they watched Amara. Friday came fast, the final period. Orchestra. Amara had considered skipping. She'd even walked halfway to the front office before turning back. She wasn't scared. She just didn't want to give him another chance to twist something that mattered to her. Still, she walked in, took her usual seat, and waited. Her violin case rested against her leg. The room felt thick with expectation. Even the students who normally fooled around were sitting straighter. Waiting. Mr. Darnell cleared his throat. Before we begin rehearsal, I want to give one of our students a chance to show what she's really capable of. He didn't say her name, but he didn't have to. Amara looked up slowly. He nodded at her, like it was some kind of honor. Jennings, would you be willing to perform something of your choice? Every eye turned to her. The room held its breath. She stood, picked up her violin, took a few steps toward the front. No pressure, Darnell said, smiling. We're all just curious what kind of training you've had. Amara knew what this was. One final try to box her in. Either she cracked under the attention, or she soared, and made him look small in the process. She chose not to think about him at all. She closed her eyes and thought of her grandmother's apartment on Union Avenue, the radio humming, her tiny hands pressing the strings until her fingertips were raw. She thought of every weekend spent learning scales instead of sleeping in, every competition where she played for judges who never expected much until they heard the first note. And she played. Not something soft, not something safe. She chose Shostakovich, Violin Concerto No. A piece that wasn't forgiving. You either mastered it or you didn't touch it. Her bow moved like it knew where to go before she did. Fingers flying, tempo rising, the room vanishing one note at a time. She didn't look at Darnell, didn't glance at her classmates. She just played. And something in the room shifted. Not in a dramatic way. No gasps, no clapping, just stillness. Like time had paused to listen. Even the air felt different. When she finished, she didn't look up immediately. She lowered the violin, let out a breath, and stood quiet. The room was silent, not because they didn't know what to say, but because they were trying to process what they had just seen. Mr. Darnell opened his mouth like he was going to say something, but nothing came out. Amara turned and walked back to her seat. No applause, no comments, just the kind of silence that said everything. After class, a boy from the cello section caught up with her in the hallway. "Yo, that was... I've never heard anything like that," he said, voice low, like it was too sacred to speak loud. Amara gave a small nod. "Thanks." Brianna caught up too. Darnell's face looked like he swallowed a lemon. They both laughed. Not loud, not mocking, just real. "Are you going to do the spring concert?" Brianna asked. "I don't know yet." "You should. He can't hide behind sarcasm forever." But Mr. Darnell wasn't planning to hide. He was planning to defend himself, in his own twisted way. The next week started with silence. Not the good kind, like after a brilliant performance. This one was heavier. Strange. Like the whole school was holding its breath again, waiting for something no one could name. Amara kept her usual rhythm. Head down, backpack tight on one shoulder, violin case never far. But her steps felt heavier. It wasn't fear. It wasn't pride either. It was that in-between place, where something big has happened, but the world around you hasn't caught up yet. By second period on Monday, she was called to the front office. She didn't ask why. She just went. Inside, Principal Marcia Linley waited, hands folded on her desk. She was a middle-aged woman with a kind smile and tired eyes. There was another man in the room, Assistant Superintendent Joseph Langley. Sharp suit, thin smile. He didn't look at Amara, just skimmed through a folder. "Amara," Principal Linley said. "We've had several calls from parents and faculty over the weekend. Some very complimentary. Some concerned." Amara stayed quiet. "Mr. Darnell submitted a report stating you disrupted class activities last Friday, that your behavior was intentionally performative and disrespectful to the rehearsal structure." There it was. Amara blinked. That was all. Langley finally looked up. "He says you undermined his authority." Principal Linley shifted in her seat. "But 3 other students submitted written accounts praising your performance. 2 of our staff members, who weren't even in the room, said they'd heard about it within hours." Amara exhaled slowly. "I didn't mean to disrespect anyone. I believe you," Linley said. "But I have to ask, did he make any inappropriate comments?" Amara didn't answer right away. She could have said it. Repeated the words. Quoted him exactly. Let the system deal with him. But something in her hesitated. Not because she doubted herself, but because she knew what that would turn into. Another adult's word against hers. Meetings, rumors, maybe even punishment dressed as protocol. "I just want to play," she said softly. That's all she ever wanted. Linley nodded slowly. "You'll still be allowed to participate in class and upcoming performances. If you feel uncomfortable at any point, I want you to come here. Immediately." Langley didn't say a word. He closed the folder, stood up, and left without a glance. Back in class, things had shifted. Mr. Darnell didn't call on her, didn't mention her name. He barely looked her way. The tension was gone, but in its place was a cold absence. He acted like she didn't exist. But the students? They saw everything. More kids began asking her questions. "Where'd you learn to play like that? Can you teach me? You doing music after school?" Even some of Darnell's favorite students had started to drift. They still followed the lesson, but their eyes weren't on him anymore. That Thursday, something strange happened. Amara was at her locker when Ms. Deanna Bright, the counselor, walked up. "You free after school?" Amara nodded. "There's someone I want you to meet." Later that afternoon, in a quiet corner of the music wing, Ms. Bright introduced Amara to Ms. Thelma Rowe, director of the Bakersfield Youth Ensemble. The woman looked like someone who'd spent her life in concert halls. Elegant, but not stiff. Her voice was warm, but her eyes were sharp. "I heard about you," she said. "The way people talk, you'd think you walked on stage with fire in your hands." Amara smiled faintly. Rowe leaned in. "We've got an opening for our spring showcase. You'd be the youngest soloist we've featured in 5 years. I want you in." Amara hesitated. "What if my school finds out?" "They probably will, but they won't be able to do a thing about it." That night, Amara practiced like she hadn't in months. Her grandmother's bow felt steady in her grip, like it knew the path forward even before she did. But Southridge wasn't done with her yet, and neither was Mr. Darnell. Not completely. By the second week of March, Southridge felt split. Not loud about it, just divided. There were the students who started watching Amara with something close to admiration. Then there were a few who whispered just loud enough to be heard. "Teacher's pet. She thinks she's better than everyone. She made him look bad on purpose." And then there were the teachers. Some smiled more when they passed her in the hallway. Others looked away. On Monday morning, Principal Linley made an announcement over the intercom. Calm, neutral tone. "We'll be hosting a student forum this Friday in the library after school to discuss equity and respectful environments in our classrooms. Participation is voluntary." No names mentioned, no finger-pointing, but everyone knew what or who it was about. Mr. Darnell didn't show up to class that day. A substitute came in, confused and unprepared. He said Darnell had taken a few days of personal leave. The students exchanged looks but didn't ask questions. Amara didn't react. She kept her head down and tuned her violin. The forum came fast. Amara wasn't going to attend at first. She hated being in the center of anything. But Ms. Bright stopped her in the hallway Thursday afternoon. "You should come. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. But you deserve to hear what people are saying." So she went. The library was packed. Students, teachers, even a few parents. A small panel sat at the front. Principal Linley, Ms. Bright, and 2 student leaders. The mic passed around. A boy named Matteo spoke first. "Some teachers think silence is respect, but sometimes we're silent because we don't feel safe saying anything." Then Brianna stood up. "We watched something unfair happen in class. We all saw it, and most of us stayed quiet. That's on us too." Amara listened. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers twitching softly like she was running through invisible scales. Finally, someone asked, "Can the student, this is about say something?" The room turned. Amara stood slowly. She didn't grab the mic. She just spoke. "I didn't want to be a lesson," she said. "I came here to learn like everybody else. I never asked to be put on the spot. I just played when I was told to." The room was silent. And when someone tells you that your voice or your talent doesn't belong in a space, it stays with you. Even if you know better. Even if you've worked your whole life to prove otherwise. A parent raised a hand. "Are you saying the teacher was racist?" Amara paused. "I'm saying he made a choice. And he made it in front of all of you. You get to decide what you saw." Ms. Bright looked at her like she was seeing something bigger than just a student. After the forum, students approached her. Quietly. Respectfully. Some shared stories, other classes, other moments, things they'd never had the nerve to talk about. The next morning, Amara found a note slipped inside her locker. Typed. No name. Just a single line. You reminded us what it sounds like when truth is played without fear. That night, Ms. Rowe confirmed Amara's slot in the showcase. Downtown, April 22nd. Meanwhile, Southridge launched an internal review. They didn't call it an investigation, but that's what it was. Teachers were asked to reflect on classroom practices. Mr. Darnell returned a week later, quieter, colder, and visibly uncomfortable. He avoided her completely. Amara didn't mind. She wasn't playing for him. She played for the kid in the third row who started bringing his violin home again. For the teacher who finally saw what she'd missed. For the girl who used to hide her sheet music because she thought no one cared. But her real stage was still coming, and it would speak louder than any classroom ever could. Downtown Bakersfield Civic Center wasn't exactly grand, but under the soft stage lights and low hum of chatter, it felt bigger than life. Families filed in wearing weekend clothes, some holding flowers, others just excitement. The youth ensemble's spring showcase drew a decent crowd every year, but this time, something was different. The program had been shared around online, and one name had started to catch attention. Amara Jennings, soloist. Age 14. She waited backstage, heels bouncing softly on the floor. Her violin case rested open beside her. Inside, her grandmother's bow gleamed. Clean, polished, steady. Ms. Rowe stepped in quietly. You ready? Amara looked up. I think so. You don't have to prove anything. Not to them, not to me, just to yourself. Amara nodded once. When her name was announced, there wasn't cheering, just the kind of hush that falls when everyone wants to listen closely. She walked out, calm and sure. Her posture, perfect. Her fingers, relaxed. The mic caught the soft scrape of her bow settling onto strings. And then she played. No dramatic intro, no gimmick, just pure sound. She played with control, but not stiffness. With emotion, but not mess. Every note told a story no one had read yet, and somehow, without saying a single word, she brought an entire auditorium to silence. Not just admiration, reflection. When she finished, the applause didn't start instantly. There was a half-second of breathless pause. Then hands came together, louder, stronger, building. Some stood, some wiped tears. In the third row, Ms. Bright stood too. So did Brianna. Backstage, Amara sat down on the folding chair, hands shaking, not from nerves, but from release. It was done. A local arts blogger wrote about the performance the next morning, called her a prodigy with poise. The story was picked up by a local paper, then a regional newsletter. Nothing massive, but enough to be seen, enough to echo. At school, Mr. Darnell kept to his corner. Word was, he'd been asked to step down from a leadership role. No public reprimand, no apology, just quiet consequences. He still ran his classes, but the sharpness was gone. So was the swagger. Some students noticed, others didn't care. Amara noticed, and she chose not to speak on it. 2 weeks later, she was invited to perform at a small youth panel on representation in the arts. At the end, a girl, probably 12, walked up, clinging to her mom's hand. You look like me, the girl said. I thought only famous people could play like that. Amara knelt a little. You don't need fame. Just patience. And a little fire. That night, Amara sat at home on the balcony with her mom. The city lights blinked below them. Her violin rested beside her, untouched. You didn't let it change you, her mom said softly. Amara looked out at the dark. It changed the way I see things, but I'm still me, her mom nodded. Your grandma would have cried her eyes out. They both laughed. And for once, Amara allowed herself to feel proud, not because she was better than anyone, but because she'd done what she came to do. She made her music speak louder than their doubt, louder than a teacher who tried to cut her down, louder than every sideways glance she'd ever gotten. She didn't fight back with words. She fought with her gift. And it was enough. If someone tries to put you in a box, remember, you're not made of cardboard. You're made of everything they never bothered to understand. Let your voice be the thing they hear long after they stop listening. Subscribe if stories like this matter to you, because some truths deserve to be told, loud, clear, and without apology.